Is this air very much a part of you as a life? Those who do not say anything, we're going to throttle you. Your life is spread all over here, isn't it? This is physical. Even in this physical, there are many levels of crudeness and subtlety, isn't it? The very gross elements in the body, there are subtler elements in this body, there is thought, there is emotion, there is air that you breathe. Or in other words, life is always from a hardcore crudeness to many subtleties. Depends how much you spread, that is how much subtlety you have in your life. How wide your wings spread, that much of subtlety is possible. So now what we're referring to as akasha is a subtle dimension of life. If you suck out the akasha, you cannot exist here. If we suck out the air from this hall, you cannot exist here. Though you cannot see it, still it is more vital than your hair, I'm sorry. Because there is more money spent on hair care on the planet, definitely a lot more than the brain care. You see where our values are. If you pull out all your hair, you can still live. If I cut your ears, you can still live. If I cut your nose, you can still live. If I just suck out this air that you cannot even see, most of the time you're not even conscious whether it exists or not. If I suck out the air, you cannot live for a moment, isn't it? If we suck out the akasha, you cannot live for a moment. There is a there's a temple in Karnataka, in southern India, which is called the Annapurneshwari temple. Anybody from Karnataka? You been to Annapurneshwari? So, at the rear part of the temple where most people may not go, because I am always poking into nooks and corners, others are all happy looking at the goddess. There is an inscription in Hale Kannada, that means the old type of Kannada, which is over 3,000 years old. There's an inscription talking about how to design an airplane in a temple. And they're saying, you can do like this, but if you fly these machines, it will disturb the ether in the planet. If it disturbs the akasha, when they say akasha, don't think space. When they're saying if you disturb the akasha, then human beings will not know peace in their life. Once akasha is disturbed, then psychological disturbances will become enormous. I think you're a living proof. I think there was an old movie by Manoj Kumar which said, sure, airplanes and the disturbance that it's causing, and he's glad his ears went away one day. Something like that, yes? So, if we suck out the akasha, this physical body will not exist for a moment. So when we say akasha, we are still talking about 5 elements. As you yourself in the question you mentioned, among the 5 elements, akash is one. So when we say elements, we are not talking about empty space. We are talking about one more substance. Like earth, like water, like air, like fire, we are talking about one more aspect of 5 elements. So do not mistake akash for empty space.
When we're alone, we tend to confer with our inner guidance, ourselves, that other voice that sounds like us, and we impress upon ourselves to divine an answer to a question, large or small, but no less important in the moment. And this is what is taken from us under the guise of social acclamation, education, etiquette, and instruction. We are molded to be acceptable to a specific system, and it all begins with the mind. There has been an evolution of this specific type of process, but nevertheless it has always remained as an invisible harness, one that keeps us on track, on time, on good behavior, getting good grades, maintaining a GPA, and an excellent credit rating. It's part of the system that's in the air. It just is. It's what we do. We have to go to school and learn how to make a good living so we can afford to provide for our families so they can grow up and do the same thing. as we've all been doing for generations, because that's what we do. It's the serpent eating its own tail, the Ouroboros effect to infinity. But whose infinity? To what end? Our own? Or one that's been predetermined? Do we really have a choice, or just a different school to the same end, in the same society? Because you could come to the distinct conclusion that it's also the cannibalizing of individual potential, the guidance to serve some other entity. Sometimes in those private alone moments, we come away with an innate sense that things aren't right. If that depresses us, then we can have something prescribed to numb the symptom of that which is trying desperately to tell us something. That we are much greater than the sum total of a well-paying job and a 401k with amazing benefits and a company car, all of which are fast-drying vapors in a time gone by. Where we find ourselves thankful for enough to pay down the debt inherited by the very same demands of the tail engulfed by the mouth, or vice versa, depending on where you may find yourself at this point in time. I don't remember the day I was born. I have no real memories until about the age of 5, and there are some years I can't remember much at all. I have no recall when I see the year in front of me. Of course, it doesn't mean those years were devoid of content, that I didn't live through every day and hour contained in that year or years. I suppose all those snapshots, real or imagined, are contained in the archives of the ages, the Akashic Records. And for those not familiar with the Akashic Records, here's a definition from Wikipedia, and I quote, "The Akashic Records are a compendium of all human events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent ever to have occurred in the past, present, or future. They are believed by theosophists to be encoded in a non-physical plane of existence known as the etheric plane. There are anecdotal accounts but no scientific evidence for the existence of the Akashic Records. Akasha is the Sanskrit word for aether or atmosphere. Also in Hindi, Akash means sky or heaven." Unquote. Now, there was the mention of no scientific evidence for existence of the Akashic Records, but then one would have to wonder which science was being referenced, and my guess would be the new science commonly referred to as scientism, which is more of a pseudoscience, as is most modern medicine, psychiatry, etc. But that's another story for another day.
We can no longer depend on air power, whether it be bombers or guided missiles. We must depend on brain power. We must depend on the ability of our educational institutions to cultivate that brain power so that it may be used as well as it possibly can be.
Through the years, we've taken education for granted, have even grown neglectful. All around us, things have been changing, and now, suddenly, schools have a lot to do with national security and our survival. Now there's trouble. And we realize that the trouble is with brains and training and technology.
If this nation should unfortunately be called upon to defend itself, the real front-line soldier would be the scientist with the test tube and the Geiger counter.
The National Defense Education Act created thousands of high school science laboratories with tools that went way beyond the traditional microscope.
By the use of a videotape recorder and a kinescope, we are able to provide many film clips, many kinds of materials that are just not available to the classroom teacher.
New funding brought television to the classroom, and television brought the world to students and connected students to the world.
Involvement, interest, judge for yourself. These boys are at Cape Canaveral, helping with the countdown of another rocket. The excitement heightens, but a clever science teacher has turned this program into a lesson in propulsion, gravity, and atmospherics.
Language labs utilizing electronic apparatus and modern theories of learning are especially important.
Gone were the studies of Latin and Greek. In addition to French and German, new language laboratories now taught Russian and Chinese.
Universities which had never taught Russian before were encouraged to institute Russian courses. And in that first year after 1957, there were more people applying to learn Russian in this country than I'd ever seen before.
The Sputnik moment had provoked an amazing time in America. Thanks to the National Defense Education Act scholarships, millions of men and women went to college to study scientific and technical courses. They went on to attack problems and uncover opportunities in every area of life. And they initiated American-led revolutions in electronics, computer science, psychology, environmental and earth sciences, and they created and built the Internet.
At various moments during our lifetimes, we may have asked ourselves, what am I doing here? What's my purpose in this lifetime? Why do these things always happen to me? What is the purpose of life? And you might conclude that it's an easy question. Live a sensible life, have a family, and try your best to extend those experiences to your children so they might take that information and use it to their best advantage. At face value, this makes perfect sense, and that's pretty much what the average life is comprised of. The variable, of course, in this equation is the external stimulus, what the world itself throws at us, or more importantly, what the man-made synthetic version of the world throws at us, because it's this version of reality that is the most manipulated, and there is a purpose for it. It's a subtle introduction, but all-encompassing, and of course it begins with those first teachers of ours. Our parents, themselves products of the same environment, have condensed all they've learned and they regurgitate it to us in the most simplistic form. They are attempting to make our lives as easy as possible. There are variables in this stage of development that encompass all aspects. Our physical and mental states are impressed upon more than any other time in our lives. In the world now, a baby is exposed to all types of electronic pollution, vaccinations, much more so than any other time in history. I'm no psychiatrist, scientist, social expert. I'm not degreed in medicine, and as a matter of fact, I never went to a college. I did 2 years in a naval prep school, and I barely squeezed myself through the remainder of public high school, only choosing to do so in case the Navy called. They did, but I didn't go. I'm learning as I go. I'm peeling back the layers of social programming as I do. I can see just how much I've been trained to believe everything I see and hear. What's more is, I've also understood how it's made me feel through the years. A sense of accomplishment after paying off a debt, feeling good about getting a tax refund, or seeing my choice make it to the White House. I'm slowly understanding that it's not really a good idea to follow the crowd or take orders from another human being simply because they're wearing a costume and carrying a weapon. I've noticed, too, that many others are making the same discovery, and of course I begin to realize that's the way it should be, always. The individual should make the decision based on experience, not orders or programs devised by others trained by still more steeped in institutional or corporate rules and regulations. The maze has gotten muddy over all these years, and the human has been taken from his own awareness and experience.
The biggest question people ask, and it's a great question, is, what is the Akashic Record? I mean, it sounds so esoteric and so remote and far away. And the truth is, it's not. It's right here. It's right here. It is, the Akashic Record is a vibrational record of every soul and its journey. So everybody's in it, which is a wonderful thing, as far as I'm concerned, because we're all in it. All souls throughout time are in the Akashic Record. There are 2 parts to the record. The first part is like the static or the fixed part of the record, and that is the blueprint of of the individual soul. It's like the thumbprint, if you will. It's like the soul print of a person. And what this is who, it's the individual in their divine essence. It's who we are really, who you are really throughout time.
This is not about hanging blame on our parents or assuming this is for the remainder of our lives. It's about understanding the massive power we possess as individuals and how we've been mentally neutered through constant programming. Now, for those of us cringing at such a notion and thinking there's no way such massive amounts of people could ever be entrained so easily, I know for sure I was programmed with all the above, and I'm still cutting my way through it. The barrage has intensified over the last couple of generations by design because there's a battle being waged for our compliance. We have the ability to walk away, to break from this exposure at any time, but of course we need to understand that we needed to do so. That's the catch-22. The movie of the week, the Manchurian Candidate, the special effects, the drugs, TV, the credit rating, the mortgage, and the Alexa in the living room lowering the lights and adjusting the air conditioning. It's easy, but then again, it's a long walk through the gauntlet of precision brain scrubbing and stepping over the Roomba while sipping from a bottomless cocktail of intrusion and collusion in our own incarceration. It sounds very spooky and melodramatic, doesn't it? But then again, we did all vote on it. Maybe not this time, but we did sign the cable contract, the cell phone bill, the credit card statement with all the terms of our financial obligations to the issuing banking corporation. But also, we do know all of this. We knew it when we entered into it. But there's a kind of magnetic pull toward the high definition of all. It's a synthetic swoon that always seems to catch us off guard.
daughter lives, and she notifies us when she comes out.
Now, you talked about a crater on the moon. Now, I thought all the moon stuff had been debunked and that nobody ever really knows what goes on the moon. What's this?
Well, this is the Gassendi crater. This is 55 miles long and oval-shaped. It's in the Mare Humorum Sea, or on the edge of it. Since 35 years ago, they wondered why this particular crater had these lines in it. And with the magnification which you can get with a larger telescope, this is what they found. These lines are tubes laying on the surface of this crater and running under some of the mountain ridges. There are three large dome-shaped structures in here. These tubes run clear outside of the crater, and we know they are tubes laying on the surface because the sun is shining from this angle, and this mountain peak causes this shadow.
What does it all mean? Does it mean that this is a rocket launching or a flying saucer base on the moon?
This has been a base on the moon for perhaps many thousands of years, used by these people in the spaceships to resupply their ships or whatever is required.
Not even Life magazine has accepted this as genuine, or has it?
Well, the Palomar Observatory people that took the picture won't even comment on it, so
There must be a great conspiracy of silence to keep George Van Tassel's secret of the universe away from the people.
No, it isn't to keep anything I know away from the people. It's to keep many things away from the people.
Let's talk about this picture.
This
is the time machine.
This is a picture of the machine we're building down there. This structure is actually up. We're working now on the parts on the equipment that operate it. This rim around here has armatures 57 feet in diameter, which will be better than 4 times bigger than the biggest armatures ever made before.
But is that the place where you did the experiments? By the way, how old were these television programs you pulled back out of time and space?
Well, the oldest one was 6 years back because television was 6 years old when this was done.
And what program was it? Do you remember?
I don't remember what program, but I know that on checking up on some of the stations that Art found that the station no longer existed. It was out of business.
Let's get down to some more basics now. Are you making a lucrative living out of traveling around the world, evangelizing for flying, around the continent, evangelizing for flying saucers?
No, Jack, I'm on a vacation to rest my wife because she's been 2 years in a 40-seat restaurant without a rest, more than anything else, and I enjoy these particular things as a sideline. I make my living on the airport, and this research is something that I've got more money into than anybody else and more contribution to it. 5 years of intensive research without any pay. We donated 10 acres of land with a well worth $23,000, and we formed this corporation for the purpose of building up and investigating this basic material.
All right, now how long is it going to take you to get your time machine in operation?
Well,
I mean, it all sounds so crazy. You must admit, I believe there are some odd things, George, but I find it hard to credit because I wasn't there myself, your own experiences.
Well, it took them around 8 years to grind the mirror for the 200-inch telescope, and the first cyclotron was something like 11 years in the progress of building.
But that cost millions, George. You haven't got millions, billions it cost.
No, we don't have the overhead that drafts from the engineers and people sitting around the payroll. All of our effort on this is voluntary by many people in technical fields that contribute their effort to the project.
They all believe in flying saucers.
They all believe in flying saucers.
You obviously believe totally in flying saucers.
Yeah.
Because of that one, does your wife believe in flying saucers?
Well, I don't know very many people that don't. It's as obvious as believing in heaven or afterlife or anything else. You have certain things you believe in life. You believe there's air we breathe, yet you don't see it. We fly airplanes on it. And this is an intangible. We can measure it.
But why should these people come down, from outer space? Why don't they land in the White House or in Kremlin Square in Moscow and say, hey, listen to us, we can tell you a few things. We're 700 years old. We can travel through space. We're not concerned with time differentials.
Well, probably they're not concerned with giving us too much of their information because we'd only use it in our battle to destroy each other here.
Did these 4 men tell you that themselves?
No, they didn't tell me that, but this is a reasonable assumption on our part that the world's divided in 2 camps, each capable of eliminating the whole civilization. And if we were to go to another planet and observe this condition, we would certainly be a little cautious about who we talk to or what we reveal.
Yeah, but you yourself, was that the only experience you had? Mind you, that's 11 years ago in 1953, George.
That's right.
When you claimed to me you went up in this elevator into the spaceship and met the guy who spoke like Ronald Colman. Was that your only contact with the...
That was the only contact I had with the people from the ship.
Have you had any other contacts with people?
I've had a recent contact last September, 1963.
Well, I don't have to ask you. Tell me.
Well, in this case, they drove a car into the airport. They didn't come in a ship. They're walking among us on the earth all the time, and we don't realize it.
I'm breathless. They. How many was they?
The they in the ship was 4 men.
They in the car?
The man that came in, there was a man came in by himself in September.
Well, you'll be telling me he had Martian license plates on the car.
No. They drove a standard American Cadillac.
And what did they want with you in 1963, 10 years later?
They gave me some more information pertinent to electronic and magnetic research.
But how did you know they were from some mysterious place in outer space.
You don't know unless they want you to know, and then they'll demonstrate some thing that they can do that we can't do, that's humanly impossible for us to do.
What did they demonstrate to you which convinced you, an apparently sober, sensible, balanced person who nevertheless believes in flying saucers, that convinced you they were unearthly people?
Well, they demonstrated the ability in front of 19 people sitting in a lounge, for instance, that they could sit there and disappear before your eyes and reappear. In fact, the man did this 3 times.
For you and your friends?
For 19 witnesses that were sitting in our lounge.
Vanished in front of your eyes?
Sit right there in a chair like you're there, and then you're not there, and then you're back there. He did this 3 times.
Now I'm going to disappear, but purely for 1 minute for this message.
Who cares what I believe? Personally, I feel it's more a perception, an experience. Mine haven't been the same as this man's were. He shared an observation I've never had, and I'd be arrogant and negligent to close myself off from information shared by someone with nothing to gain. However, any faceless entity such as government and corporations have much to gain by withholding certain truths detrimental to their power and control.
I'm here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States.